What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you've experienced? Not me, but my dad was coming down the stairs at home and was calling for my dog, Katie. He hears a female voice reply, "I'm over here." When he rounds the corner, the stairs have a turn in them and faces the source of the voice. My dog is there looking expectantly at him. He was certain that it was me playing tricks on him, but he and the dog were the only ones home at the time. We still make fun of him for it, but he was so shaken by it. There's been other weird happenings with the dog, so maybe she's just haunted or something. A couple months back, I was driving on the highway to get to work when I suddenly got a nasty feeling in my stomach, like something very bad was about to happen. I was following a big dump truck at the time. I had no idea why, but suddenly had an urge to get over to the left lane. Not half a second after I did, this dump truck hit a pothole going 70 miles per hour and a huge freaking rock launched out of the back of it, bounced off the pavement and whizzed right past my right mirror. I'm 90% sure that thing would have gone through my windshield and killed me. About 15 years ago, I was walking in Union Square in San Francisco with my then girlfriend. It was a cold December day and it was very crowded. We were both walking behind a woman and her child. I was looking at her boots, and for some reason I had the feeling that this woman was not of this world. I can't really explain it, and when I looked up at her, she turned around and glanced at myself and my GF. At that moment I became dizzy and disoriented. My GF said "whoa" at the same time. Others made the same expression around us. My GF remarked that she thought that the woman was not a normal person. It was the strangest experience I've had. I felt as if the woman did something to disorient us till we would no longer pay attention to her. Bizarre. I was at an art fair in the arts district of the city I live. A lot of the artists there use old warehouses as their own art studios. Me and my girlfriend walked to get to the very top floor of one of these warehouses after checking out almost every studio. No one seemed to care to go up that far in the building. We walk into this big open room with only two people in it. One was a woman in her mid-20s. She was a photographer with all her pictures and stuff on the wall, and the other was a skinny older guy, probably about 60. My girlfriend and I were looking at the photographer's photos when she whispers to me, "It's kind of awkward and creepy up here. We should go." We turn around to leave, and the older guy says to my girlfriend, "Here, this is from him. For your birthday soon." He hands her a picture of an old-fashioned bicycle. When, of course, that's exactly what she wanted from me for her birthday, which was in about 2 weeks from that point. My girlfriend is shocked and I ask him how he knew, and he just replies with a shrug. We're then leaving. He then says, "Be on the lookout, you know," and points to his glasses. A month later, she got a job offer as an optician. We still talk about it. It was absolutely insane. I don't even believe in psychics or anything. I once got onto a train at a small train station in Utrecht, thinking it was going to Amsterdam Central. Then, just as it takes off, I realize the one I'm in is actually going in the other direction. It only goes straight ahead, for about 5 minutes, driving at regular, high speed. But then its very first stop is somehow the exact same small station in Utrecht, and when I step out of it, I'm the only one in the train who gets out here. I'm in the exact same place where I stood before I got in. Then I just took a different train, which did finally go to Amsterdam. I still don't understand it. This happened a few years ago when I was studying abroad in Bonn, Germany. We had the weekend off and were traveling to Amsterdam for a few days by train. I had 3 of my friends with me. One of my friends and I went to stand in line for the bathroom about halfway through the journey. There's only one. In front of us are a little girl, very black hair, wearing a frilly dress and a cute pink bow tie in her hair. She's like 4, and I assume that the older woman behind her is her mom. So the person inside comes out and the little girl goes in by herself. About 10 minutes pass and the woman in front of me knocks on the door. Nothing. We give it 3 more minutes and the lady says she's worried about the kid and opens the door. She is not there. There is no window, no other exit. It's small, very similar to an airplane bathroom. The door wasn't locked even though we all distinctly heard her lock it. I then realized that this woman wasn't her mom, and the 3 of us kind of stared at each other dumbstruck, but never found an explanation for it. I used to ride my bike to school when I was a freshman in high school. One day after a heavy storm I was riding my usual route through the parking lot of a local restaurant. I thought I saw some money on the ground so I stopped and looked. First there was a $20, then another $20, some singles, a $5, and finally a $50. I was shaking as I picked up all the money and looking around to see if I was on a hidden camera show or something. I picked up my bike after shoving the money in my pocket and rode off to school. Later that day when I got home I counted all of my new loot and basked in my good fortunes. Fast forward a few years, I actually work at that restaurant now as a bartender. As a bartender at that particular restaurant you get to take your cash tips home with you at the end of the night. So I had a particularly good night and figured I would go to the bar next door for a drink. As I'm leaving the bar, it was raining really hard and I was fumbling with my key to my car and finally got in and got home and passed right out from the long shift. I woke up the next morning to find that my earnings from the night before were missing. I figured I must have dropped them in the parking lot when I was fumbling with my keys. I went back to the parking lot and looked around, but to no avail. All in all, I lost, you guessed it, $2.20s, a $5, a couple singles, and a $50. After I got over the fact that I just lost about $100 due to my own stupidity, I was seriously weirded out at the idea that there may have been an infinite loop of me giving myself $100. Factoring in inflation, you actually came out ahead. So when I was younger, I lived in a cul-de-sac with other families who all had kids my age. One night in the summer, we were all playing kickball out in the cove. It was twilight outside, so getting dark fast but still light enough to see the sky and all. Out of nowhere, we saw a massive bird in the sky. I'm not talking about an eagle or something, not common in my area anyways, but a huge bird with a wingspan of a Cessna. We all looked up and saw it, but nobody said anything. We eventually all went inside when it got dark, and no one brought it up. I saw one of the guys that was out there with me like 16 years ago recently, and when I asked if he remembered it, his eyes got huge and he thought he had imagined that. When I was a kid I got this plastic connector that would let me connect 2 soda bottles mouth to mouth. The point was you put water in one bottle and then turned it over so the water would pour into the other bottle and make a cool whirlpool in the process. I had green food coloring in the water too. So one evening I was messing around with this toy and putting in small beads and crap like that. Then I put in a quarter. A quarter is almost the same diameter as a soda bottle opening so it fit no problem. But the plastic bottle connector had a much smaller hole. Smaller than a dime. The quarter would swirl around in the whirlpool for a bit and then land in the connector and block the hole, stopping things abruptly. This went on for a few flips and then I got a really good spin. The quarter was going super fast right in middle of the whirlpool. I remember feeling disappointed that that spin was going to end as the quarter sank towards the connector. Then suddenly the quarter was clunking into the lower bottle. I took the contraption apart right after to see if it was broken, but the hole though the connector was as it had always been. Still smaller than a dime despite a quarter somehow having passed through it. My mom shut the car door before my leg was out. I said oh whatever. She turned to me and robotically said I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, tilting her head a little differently each time like she was stuck in a loop. Then she snapped out of it and continued to go in the house almost like she had no idea what just happened. Bro, your mom's a cyborg. One Saturday afternoon, the wife was out shopping and to the gym. Didn't know exactly what time she would be home. I decided to take a nap in my recliner. Some time later, I'm sound asleep, and I'm awakened by her yelling my name from the front porch. I open my eyes and shout back, yet I distinctly hear her yell, open the front door, thinking she had an arm full of shopping bags. I yelled back, okay, be right there. I hop up out of the chair, walk the 10 steps to the front door, open it, no one there. I go to the garage thinking I misheard her location, no one there. She didn't get home for a few more hours. I actually started worrying that I was going to find out she was in an accident or something, but she was fine. Crap dude, you let it in. When I was in school I had this hippie teacher who would always tell us that the universe can help if you just ask it. She told us one time her daughter had lost something very important, and when she asked the universe to help she suddenly had a massive pulling feeling towards the sink. She walks over and immediately stuck her hand down into the garbage disposal and pulled the item out in perfect condition. So I think it's total BS of course, but later that day I was searching for a thin little booklet that I really needed for school. I spent 3 hours looking for it and had no luck. Finally, out of frustration, I almost sarcastically said, "I need your help, universe." I immediately walked over to this bookcase filled with books from my stepdad. I had never once used the shelf or any book on it. I grab a random book I've never seen from the middle of a huge pile. I open it to somewhere around page 200 and right there is my booklet smashed in between the pages. It was incredibly thin, so you couldn't even tell there was anything in there if you looked at it from another angle. I'm sure there's a good explanation, but it's been well over a decade and I still remember the incredibly freaky vibe I got the moment I saw the book. I once parked my car next to a grey Toyota Highlander. The person had left their overhead light on, so I pulled the door handle to see if it was unlocked so that I could turn it off for them. The instant I pulled the door handle, a car alarm went off. Not the car whose handle I just pulled, but the one on the other side of my car. That car, a grey Toyota Highlander. Not the creepiest, but definitely made me exhale sharply and then walk away confused. Was riding my bike when I was a kid, looking down at the ground in front of me. Suddenly looked up and realized I was about to clothesline myself on a tree branch. I closed my eyes out of fear and was utterly surprised when I didn't hit it. I stopped and turned around. Branch was still there, right at chest height, and the tire tracks from my bike went right under it. It was low enough that I couldn't possibly have ducked under it, and to this day I'm convinced that it somehow phased through my body. Mutant powers often first manifest during moments of stress. I live in Suburbsville, Midwest. Couple years ago I went to our local courthouse to print neighborhood ordinances, so I'd know my new shed would be okay. It was a quaint old building, never been there before. Had an authentic old-timey feeling. It's important to repeat, I'd never been to the courthouse in my life until that day. On the way home, I randomly stopped by the video rental to pick up a new flick for my kids. Real Steel, robot movie. I knew nothing about the film, other than robots and sorta positive reviews. It opened with a guy walking into a courthouse. Something wasn't right. It looked too familiar. I shouted, "Pause the TV and read the name on the building." It was our tiny Midwest courthouse. That scene was filmed in our little town and I had no clue. I'd walked in that building 2 hours earlier for the first time in my life. You'll never understand how strange that felt. I rented a movie that literally opened by tracking my movements 2 hours earlier, in the middle of nowhere. I was sitting in my car with just my dad and I distinctly heard my sister, who was at home, say, "Are you guys almost home?" I'm scared in a very specific, concerned tone of voice. 2 seconds later, my dad's phone rings. Guess who's on the line? My sister. She said, "Are you guys almost home?" I'm scared in the same concerned tone of voice. I was pretty freaked out. Many years ago, me and my GF were sitting in front of a bar one night with a view on the street it was located on. Some guy on a moped drove by, turned around and got off the moped. Now this was in a period of my life where I had deja vus all the time and I had this "I've seen this before" feeling again. So I decided to share it with my GF for once. See that guy with the moped? He's going to park it at the street light, pee against the wall across the street and then drunkenly cross the street towards this bar where the bouncer will deny him access. I finished the sentence while he was still walking with the moped in his hand and my GF looked at me with a look of "What's wrong with you?" Then he parked the moped against the street light, walked to the wall, started peeing, crossed the street and got denied access by the bouncer. Every last thing was right and it was the most terrifying thing I've experienced in my life. Luckily it never happened again. How to get all the girls 101. One night, my son watched me slowly walk past the open living room door, pausing to look at him briefly, before calmly walking out of the front door. As I didn't even register an acknowledgement when he spoke to me, he assumed that I was sleepwalking and walked out of the door behind me, only to find that I had vanished. At the time we lived in a first floor flat apartment, and the only way I could have vanished so quickly was to have fallen, or jumped, from the window in the communal hallway, but he looked out, and I was nowhere to be seen. By now, he was completely freaking out, and ran back into our bedroom to throw on some jeans and shoes to look for me. It was around 1 AM. He was in PJ bottoms at the time. He found me, sound asleep in bed, exactly where I was all the time. He woke me up more frightened than I have ever seen him in his life. visibly sweating and clearly very upset. Never figured it out to this day, but my money is on some type of lucid waking dream. He goes completely ape if the subject is even raised, because as far as he's concerned it was real, and normally he's one of the most hyper-rational people that I know. I had a fricked up dream that I was a 40-something mother of 3 and my husband just left me. I felt like I lived months in this woman's life. I was served divorce papers, applied for jobs, bought like 10 sacks of potatoes for the kids to eat and refused to eat so they could. Eventually the mortgage was a few months late and the bank foreclosed on the house. The children and I lived in the streets. I remember being thankful that we were homeless in Florida so the weather was warm. It felt like months passed in the dream. We were dirty and hungry and sick. One of my children got so sick she ended up dying. I remember the excruciating pain and grief that I felt. It felt like I was a hollow shell and there was nothing left to live for. I've never felt anything like it since, and my father and all my grandparents have passed IRL since. I woke up crying and still grieving for a child that didn't exist. I was depressed for weeks because I missed her. I was an 11-year-old kid living in Illinois. Seriously, the weirdest thing ever. I have so much sympathy for people who have lost a child because I feel like I've felt that. When I was 10 or 11, I had a similarly vivid dream where my family adopted a boy my age and we became best friends. In the dream, we grew up together, played football and baseball, went to college, etc. It all felt like it was real life, until I woke up and looked over to where he slept in the dream and realized it wasn't real. Spooked me for a while. This happened to me just recently. My girlfriend's sandals were in the middle of the floor of the living room and I picked them up, telling her that I was taking them to the shoe rack in the mudroom. On the way back, I stopped for something in the kitchen for maybe 5ish minutes. But when I walked back into the living room, the sandals were sitting side by side right in the exact same spot I picked them up from. I was sober as a judge and she remembers everything the exact same as I do. The kicker was that we have a camera in the living room. Upon watching the footage, I did indeed bend over, pick them up, and walk straight through the kitchen to the mudroom. Stopped in the kitchen on the way back and then walked into the living room to immediately look down and see the same shoes I just put away. The spot on the floor was occluded by a table so we couldn't actually see the sandals on the floor in the footage. We were both seriously freaked out, but right about the time we realized we just witnessed a glitch, we got a phone call and someone knocked on the door so we had no time to keep thinking about it. Summer while in middle school, watching my grandparents' house with my mom while they were on vacation. Hot day, out in the front yard washing my Woody the Woodpecker Honda mountain bike. Cause I'm 14 and a crap. Grandparents live in a cul-de-sac. This little black girl, maybe 8-12 years old, walks down the hill into the cul-de-sac in a pretty but plain white dress. Barefoot, only looking straight ahead. I don't pay too much attention, but also kept watching. She gets closer to my grandparents' driveway and I stop washing my bike. I get a weird feeling. She walks straight up the driveway, didn't even look near me, walks into the open garage and disappears around the corner. I run after her, gone. All the doors and windows were open, and my mom was cleaning the house. I asked where the girl went and got a crazy look. Mom had no idea what I was talking about. The backyard is fenced so she couldn't have gone anywhere but back out front. To this day I have no idea if it was a ghost or what. I think about it a lot. I had this happen once. One moment you're talking to them right there and then you get distracted by something else. You go back to them since you want to tell them something and go after them and they're nowhere to be seen. It's strange, alright. I was walking home from school in elementary. I looked up and the crosswalk lady was there along with the people who walked home on its same route. Crosswalk lady handed me some gum, which I pretended to eat, then threw on the ground. Stranger danger. When I looked back up, everyone was gone. There was no crosswalk lady, no other children, and the gum I threw on the ground was gone and it was dark out. I panicked and rushed to cross the street and get home, but then when I crossed the street and looked back, it was light again and everything was back how it was before. Not so much creepy, but I was talking to a friend a few years ago about her son. She'd just had a really bad morning with him acting up and was really upset. She was saying that she was a terrible mother and that she didn't know what to do. I said, of course you're not a terrible mother. You've done a great job with Oscar and you'll do a brilliant job with the one that's on the way. She stopped dead and looked at me in shock. How did you know that? She said, I only took the test this morning and I haven't even told my husband yet. I genuinely have no idea why that came out of my mouth or how I knew. When my dad's mom was still alive, she used to live with us. And oddly enough, it was always me who found her whenever she was in trouble. She was obese and had a bad hip, and also a habit of falling out of chairs. We never had the best relationship. I didn't like her for some reason that I don't know, can't remember. I was a weird kid, I guess. Still, I always knew that she loved me. One day after school I came home to find her just standing by the window, looking at me but also sorta looking right through me, if you know what I mean. I just knew that something wasn't right, so I called my mom, who called an ambulance. It turned out that grandma had a stroke. She managed to recover. At the age of 86, I call that determination, holy crap. Anyway, and my name was the first word she said after the stroke had left her mute. I felt so bad since I was very cold towards her most of the time. Fast forward a few months, maybe even a year. She falls down and breaks her arm, which leaves her bedridden. Shortly after she dies, a few days after the funeral, my parents went to the graveyard to leave some candles and didn't tell me. Once I realized I was home alone, I was pretty scared because I still remembered grandma's corpse in the nope. And nope. I went into the living room and, even though I knew that there was no one in the house, I shouted, "Is anyone here?" And I swear in that moment grandma's stress ball thingy, a squishy ball she was given to squeeze after her arm had healed. Dad put it on the TV after she had died, fell right off of the TV. There was no way that anything could have moved the little yellow ball from its place on the massive old television. When my parents came back, I told them what had happened, and my mother joked that it was grandma telling me that she is still there, keeping an eye on us. It's been 8 years since then. I hope my grandmother still does watch over us, and I hope she knows that I am sorry for not being a better granddaughter. Dropped the cap to my toothpaste once and found it an hour later. Somehow it ended up in my bed. I once dropped my phone down the side of my bed. Couldn't find the bastard thing anywhere. Next morning I'm at college, just sitting there, and it starts buzzing in my pencil case. Still confuses me to this day. In my room on the second story, sitting on the bed, I hear a noise outside my window. It sounds like someone clapping their hands together, but with the volume turned up to 100, like louder than a human could ever make that noise. And it's clearly outside the house. I'm wondering if a tree branch breaking could possibly make that noise, and just about to get up and look when I hear it again. Not quite as loud, but just inside my room, over in the corner, and again, at the foot of my bed, right next to my freaking ear. I jumped about a mile. Everyone I've told this to has said it was probably the house settling or some such, but if you'd heard it, you wouldn't still think that. It was super creepy, and I've thankfully never experienced anything like it before or since. Got on a train once. It was completely different than all the other trains that ride at particular railway. No automatic doors. You had to open and close yourself. Interior was really nice and old-fashioned. There were even drop-down tables from the seats in front. I got worried that I had got onto some kind of first-class train and that I'd get slapped with some kind of charge for not having the right ticket. Of course this doesn't exist. There were other people on there, just normal-looking people. It only stopped at the destination I was going to, which meant like a 50-minute journey with no stops. The route it went wasn't even the same. I've never seen one like it again at that station. Back when I was 18, my best friend and I were riding our bikes through the suburbs late at night. We were riding from the beach back to my house, which goes beach, car park, main road, houses, park, houses, my house. We had just crossed the first section of houses, then the pond. Then we had just started crossing through the second bunch of houses when we experienced a freaking time warp back to the footpath that ran adjacent to the start of the first section of houses. I'm not religious, but I'm pretty adamant that Jesus freaking Christ himself picked us up like chess pieces and put us there. We'd been riding side by side but in silence until then. Then I said something along the lines of, "Holy crap, did you feel that?" To which he responded yes and explained the exact same feeling as I had before I explained to him. Still weirds me out so hard to this day. This one is kind of lame, but when I was a kid, we'd go to my grandparents for holidays and my uncle would always show up in his yellow Jeep Wrangler. I loved that thing because he would always take us for rides with the top down and do a little off-roading, and it was a lot of fun. Had conversations with my uncle and many other family members about this yellow Jeep. After a few years, my uncle shows up in a red Jeep. I asked him if he got a new one and he looked at me like I was crazy. I was certain he had never had a red Jeep, so I asked my family if my uncle was messing with me and they all acted like I was insane. That he had only ever had a red Jeep. Very minor thing I know, but it was just weird and made me question everything I saw for a while. It was like someone opened up console commands in Skyrim and just changed the color of the car real quick. Once had a premonition that saved my life, and another that saved my job. While living in China, I was driving my electric scooter on a road that ran along a river. My left turn was coming up, and I had to cross traffic from the bike lane. I looked in my mirror and over my shoulder and there was nothing there, but in my mind, a bus nailed me, so I held off a few seconds, and sure enough, the bus that I never saw blew right past me, and then I made my turn. That was nice. When I moved back to the US, I was working at my desk, my boss was out of town. Okay, I was on Imgur. In my mind's eye, my boss burst in and said, "Did you miss me?" She was kinda a loon, and in this scenario she saw I was on Imgur and flipped out. Back to the real world. Outside my mind, I shut down Imgur and YouTube, and brought up real work. In a few moments, my boss burst in, shouts, "Did you miss me?" and I got to just say, "Hey, I thought you were out of town." Weird stuff. A while back I was sat at my desk under the window. It was an attic room, so the window was slanted above me, and it started hailing and one single hailstone landed on the table in front of me. The window was most definitely locked shut, so I am convinced it passed through the glass. Not sure if this counts, but this experience changed my life. I struggle with sleep paralysis, and as a narcoleptic I deal with a lot problems with sleeping. However, one experience proved too extremely disturbing. As I was slipping from consciousness into sleep, in what felt like a timeless moment, I started to lucid dream. Now usually in lucid dreams, I'm aware, and that's great because then I'm undeterred in my imagination. However, this experience was different. I heard voices, not uncommon for those with sleep paralysis, but these were different voices than I have heard in the past. In an unknown language, still decipherable in English in some inextricable way, I could hear people talking, as if they were at a control board. The voices were giving a training session on me. They were saying that they should pay attention to my eye movements in order to understand how to maneuver me, as if they were running a simulation of some sort. I never had the experience again, and I'm sure it was just some hiccup with my narcolepsy, but it really screwed up my day after I had snapped awake. There's this particular pavement I sometimes walk down during my lunch break. There's this particular location on this particular path where, if I'm engrossed in something else at the time, like checking my phone, I'll suddenly glimpse something in my peripheral vision and flinch as if I've realized at the last second I'm about to walk into a low-hanging branch. There's nothing there at all, nor is there anything in the immediate area that could be misinterpreted as being close to the path. It's happened several times over the past few months, always in exactly the same location, and only if I'm completely not expecting it. I compare it to the Hitchhiker's Guide to Flying. Fall to the ground and accidentally divert your attention elsewhere at the last moment so you forget to hit the ground, and I'm fairly sure I've discovered a wormhole. I've seen many people mention this, but when I was younger I would dream, and it would be like just a usual day. Then like weeks or months after, I'd have a day exactly like that, down to a T, conversations, lunches, etc, and it freaked me the frick out. Like I was dreaming about that whole day. I'd forget about it, then I would live it. I don't have any like specifics. However, I remember the feeling when I realized, like my heart would just stop and so would time for a second, and then it was back to normal. This happened to me a week ago. I was visiting Berlin with a friend. First night there, we took the train back to our hotel. Got on the wrong one and subsequently got out again at the next station, Ostbahnhof. So, we got out of the wrong train, looked up which one we can take from there, waited 5 minutes and got on the train. We had to go exactly 5 stations. Doing a little chit-chatting about our evening, we arrived at the first station, and just before the train was coming to a halt, I suddenly got a weird feeling. I looked out of the window and couldn't really tell what was wrong, when my friend looked at me with this insecure expression and asked, "Isn't this the same station where we got on this train a few minutes ago?" I looked out of the window, And indeed, the blue sign on the platform said Ostbahnhof, and the station looked exactly the same as the last one. Obviously, we were really confused after this. We got off the train and searched for all kinds of possible explanations, but we didn't come up with anything. Eventually we did find a way to our hotel, but this event left us puzzled for the rest of the week, and it was the weirdest glitch type of thing I ever experienced. Kind of mild but still creepy to me. A couple years ago a co-worker and I are going down the stairs after work. We're on the 4th floor, so it's like 8 short flights, so it doesn't take long. At a certain point walking down the stairs it occurs to me, or it at least feels like we've gone down more than 8 flights, like we're looping. We could just chalk it up to mind wandering, being tired. It's 11 PM. But almost as soon as I had the thought I see the door to the parking garage and my co-worker says that took longer than normal. That's some Mario 64 crap you got going on. I was waiting to pull out of a parking lot when a person drove by in a car that was the same model and color as mine, blue 95 Saturn, and the driver even looked like me. After I got out on the road, I caught up to him, and he had my license tag number. I had it memorized because the first 3 letters happened to be a mnemonic. He sped up and ran a light to get away from me. I have a couple, but I think this is the most odd one. I've been living in my house with my parents and brother for about 6 years when this happens. You know how you just get used to the creaks and sounds of doors opening, just because you've been there for so long? We have this garage door that makes a lot of sound when it's being opened. On this particular day my dad was at work and my mom and brother had taken off about 20 minutes prior to this event. I was on a social media site, Twitter I think, and I was just hanging out in my room alone. And I hear my garage door opening, so I decide to get up and walk to the garage door, inside my house, to see what my mom and bro had forgotten. As I opened up the door, there was nothing, just a clear view to my driveway. But as soon as I opened the door a gust of wind pushed its way in and all the TVs in the house turned on. I knew it was all TVs because there was that particular 2-second lag from room to room and it was loud enough to hear it. The interesting part was that they all were on the guide channel. You know, for new users and stuff. I didn't have a threatening feeling, so I closed the garage and began to walk back to the bedrooms and suddenly all the TVs turned off. This happened to my parents. They took a trip to Germany 1 year before they had my sister or me, just exploring old towns and seeing my mom's extended family. Well, one night in one of those old towns, they were walking down a street. Suddenly, a huge marching band came around the corner. They were playing music and such, but it was just strange because it seemed like they were doing this for a parade, but there was no one else on the street. The band continued down the road until they turned the corner. My parents just stood there for a few minutes confused. Finally, they went over to the corner where the band had gone, but the band was nowhere in sight, and the music was gone. My weirdest experience like this included a good friend of mine, back when I was in 6th form. So 17 going on 18. I had a dream that I had to go visit this guy in hospital. I didn't know what was wrong with him, just that it was pretty serious and it was to do with his balls. Yes, weird I know. In the dream his father was sitting on the hospital bed with him in it, hospital gown and all, and I spoke to his mum and stepdad about what to expect and all that. So I go into 6th form the next day and think what a funny dream I'll tell him. He's sitting there with his then girlfriend. Mate, I had a weird dream last night that you were in hospital and I had to visit you. But get this, all I know is there was something wrong with your balls. They both go white and his girlfriend just says you should tell him. Turns out he had found a lump and had to get it checked out. Thanks God that it was just a cyst though. When I was little, I saw something appear in my room at night. It walked into the wall and disappeared, left a hole in the wall. I could see through my wall into the hallway and into the open linen closet. The edge of the hole looked pixelated, but this was in the 70s. Hole closed up, wall was intact. Filed under WTF and kept it myself till now. I was watching my 5-year-old twin nieces play one day. They were on their big wheels. One girl was going one way, the other girl was going the other way. Then without saying a word to each, without looking at, talking, or acknowledging each other, they got off their respective big wheels, switched, and continued going in separate directions. The hairs on my neck stood on end. That was some freaky crap. When I was a kid I distinctly remembered 2 movies down to certain exact scenes. The thing is these movies weren't out and had not even been confirmed out yet. I remembered some of Ghost Rider 2 which I asked my parents to see all the time and they would be confused because it wouldn't come out for about another 7 years. The other which I remember better was Cats vs Dogs 2 or something like that. The first and second movie were about dogs and cats being spies and fighting each other. This was one of those movies where they gave actually dogs and cats voiceovers. I could remember exact characters and settings. My mom was very confused when we saw the movie for the first time and I was disappointed cause I knew what would happen. When I was very young I was playing with my grandma's cat. I chased it around the house and when I got to the kitchen it ran towards the door that leads from the kitchen to the hallway. When I got to the door the cat wasn't in the room. I was confused and opened the door. The cat was sitting on the other side. This all went down in just a few seconds. The door was closed so the cat did not open it. I was completely convinced the cat just teleported right through the door. Still don't know how it worked. It probably used a cat dimension portal. I have had some weird out of body experiences as a kid, to the point where my parents sent me to the doc's neurologist to have some tests done. I remember the first episode I had, in a Greek restaurant with my family. It felt like I was having an out of body experience, but I was simply waiting for my food to be served. It happened a lot as a kid, and has gradually less and less as an adult. The best way to describe it is as if I had a VR headset on. I was looking at my life through someone else's eyes. The feeling makes me question life, as in, is this real life or is it a weird Matrix-esque thing that I'm watching acting in? It fricked with my head for a long time, until I sort of came to terms with it. Then it used to happen and I'd almost look forward to it in a weird sort of way. It would only last less than a minute, and it would sort of bring a bit of perspective on things. I don't know, it hasn't happened for a long time. There used to be this build-up feeling, like I could feel it was going to happen. That feeling has happened once or twice in my adult life, but the actual event hasn't happened for a long time. I'm sure it will happen again in the future, maybe. I'd love to know if anyone else ever had something similar. As a kid, without the Matrix or VR headset references, I couldn't describe the feeling to doctors or my parents, and it used to freak me out so much. Now it would be much easier to describe. I get this. It's horrible. It's like you become incredibly self-aware, and your vision is kind of recessed inside your head. Super unsettling. So my father died when I was 14 and ever since then I have always kept his funeral card folded up in a sleeve in my wallet. One of the sleeves that's hidden behind your id slot. Anyway, 7 years later I'm walking to the store with my friend and the route we take is kind of like a big oval that leads from my house to the store and back. That friend of mine was a born again Christian type of spiritual fellow, so naturally during the walk he was talking about God and miracles and stuff like that. We were smoking a blunt during the walk so I was just quiet, smoking and listening. Not once did I take my wallet out or open it or even put my hands in my pocket. We reach the store, my friend buys another Dutch Master and we head back. Note that the way back is the opposite side of the oval path that we took to get to the store, with many blocks and twists and turns in between. So we are a few blocks from my house and we are extremely high and he starts talking about some really deep crap. All of a sudden I stop him mid-sentence because I see a folded funeral card in the distance on the floor that fit the same color scheme as the one I had in my wallet, but it was too far to see any other detail. I stop my friend and I take out my wallet to check mine, and it's gone. I walk over to it and pick it up and it's my father's funeral card. I had not walked near that area in days, and had not opened or taken out my wallet that entire day. How it ended up there I will never know. You have been visited by the science doggo. Upvote now and you will get high grades and good results within the next week. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.